We not only welcome all our viewers back, but I would like to welcome back that nostalgic Trek-loving feeling we all get and share with Fans Weekly. This is a duty to uphold that Prime directive that also enables channels like the amazing Amazon Prime streaming service to add Paramount Plus as a channel for new Trek.
Ooh, that's very lucky. What would you do without Paramount Plus? He's Brian Kreutz, I'm Lily Fox-Lim, and you're watching A Captain's Log. We're so glad you've warped through your TV channels to land here as a member of our crew, because we're not through talking to Star Trek The Original Series guest actor Garth Pillsbury.
Yes.
What a star.
Absolutely. If you were here last episode, you learned that one of the things Garth was well known for was his role as Wilson in the episode Mirror, Mirror from the original series. Now, you may or may not know, mirror universes are alternate universes where war and conquest run rampant.
Well, it's a good thing our studio has never entered a mirror universe like the Enterprise did, or else who knows what would happen.
I could think of so many scenarios, but most of them would not end well, or our director might wage war against us. Dustin.
He definitely would. Or we would against each other, or the PAs. Basically a lot of drop kicks, jabs, and chaos would ensue in the studio.
Well, it's a thought-provoking experiment, and I could probably discuss potential scenarios all day long with you, Lils, but we do have Garth Pillsbury waiting for us in part 2 of our interview.
Ooh, yeah, you're right. We could, but let's get to Garth.
Lily, I have a couple quick news stories to share with our Trekkies this week. The Star Trek Starfleet Academy series at Paramount Plus has cast Academy Award winner Holly Hunter in a lead role. Now, she is the first cast member of the highly anticipated Paramount Plus series. Hunter's character will serve as the captain and chancellor of the Academy, presiding over both the faculty and new class of Starfleet cadets as they learn to navigate the galaxy in the 32nd century. The Star Trek Starfleet Academy series will begin production in Toronto on the newly renamed Star Trek stage this summer. Now, in other Star Trek news, British filmmaker Simon Kinberg is in talks with Paramount to produce a new Star Trek feature film. The writer, director, producer Kinberg has been behind a variety of high-profile success projects like the Matt Damon film The Martian, Apple TV's Invasion, and several X-Men films. This direction is set to forge a new Star Trek franchise for Paramount Pictures as a film series, and is set to take the story to unexplored parts of the Star Trek timeline, focusing on the formation of Starfleet and humanity's first contact with aliens.
First, we have a quick break. Back in a moment.
A Captain's Log returns in a moment.
Welcome back to A Captain's Log as we continue part 2 of our interview with Garth Pillsbury. There are many alternative factors to his career in front of and behind the camera. Garth became a professional photographer in the late 60s, even after acknowledging that television and film pay extremely well. As he says, one is treated very, very well on the set. He goes on to say, in terms of really getting one's teeth into a part as an actor, stage is where it's at. So let's get back to this one. Brian, I believe you have our next question for Garth.
Yes, absolutely. So Garth, what do you remember about walking onto the soundstage and space setting there at the famous Paramount lot and getting your blue and black costume? Now, this had to be a thrill, and if you want to share a moment you remember about working with the cast, or perhaps a memory that you've never shared before.
Some 50 plus years ago, and my memory fades somewhat. As Shakespeare said, my salad days, not meaning eating salads, but my youth. The Star Trek episodes. First, this reminds me of a joke. Why did the actor cross the road? He thought someone might be watching. And so I'm working as an actor. What fun. A really fun part. Who knows, maybe this could lead to a recurring role or other roles at the Paramount lot. I'm working with the star of the show. Whoopee! A great bunch of actors, director, and a crew to work with. Beam me up, Scotty.
A Captain's Log returns in a moment.
Let's tractor beam you in for another spin around Star Trek's original series guest actor Garth Pillsbury. That's right, this is the one and only broadcast TV Star Trek talk show, A Captain's Log. BK, I think you have another question for Garth.
Yes, absolutely, I do. Now, Garth, you brought back to Paramount to play a different character on Star Trek, this time a troglodyte prisoner with glasses and an interesting costume, along with NFL player Fred Williamson in an identical costume. What was the dialogue like, plus the experience in this episode titled The Cloudminders?
Troglodyte was apprehended leaving the city. He is without a transport card, so we thought you would want to question him.
Remove his shields. What is your business in Stratos, Troglodyte? Speak! I command you.
My business is to repair.
Repair what?
There are damaged entrance panels.
Indeed. Then you must have a repair permit. Where is it?
It was forgotten.
Did you also forget your transport card?
It was lost when your sentinels attacked me.
And where was your cavern implement lost? Could this perhaps be it?
I came to make repairs.
And you shall make them. By giving us the names of the disruptors.
I know nothing.
I would advise you to increase your knowledge.
That is not possible for a troglodyte. The Strato City dwellers have said it.
Secure him to the rostrum. How unfortunate.
Well, you feel as though that, there are several studios. There's, of course, Universal and 20th and Columbia and Paramount, et cetera, and you feel that if you're being called back to a particular studio, apparently maybe you're going to be one of the actors that they always, rely on, that they like. I was very surprised that I was called back to do that. Of the two roles that I did on the Star Trek, I actually, in a sense, more than in a sense, I like doing the second one, which was called The Cloudminders, mainly because I had more lines, and I felt as though there was more acting on my part involved. Looking back at it, I personally, and I think most people feel this way, acted like I could have done better. The reality of it is that I actually enjoyed doing the second part, which was the troglodyte, because there were more lines. I felt as though I was doing a good job acting. But as I think I've always felt, as though no matter what you do, you always think, when you think back on it, I could have done better. Something about it that didn't quite click, didn't feel real, whatever it is. On the other hand, at the end of that one, the director came over to me and he said, "Garth, that was very good job," which of course, and I said to him, "Well, tell my agent that, so it'll get a spark under him to try to get me even more work." But I don't think he did that, but I wanted him to. So it was more rewarding in doing it, but it turns out, in reality, doing the mirror was probably much more rewarding in the end.
I understand the Cloudminders episode director, Judd Taylor, really liked your performance. Tell us about your experience on the set and a memory or two that you distinctly remember.
It made me feel, this is an ego booster, there's no doubt about it, it made me feel quite good, very good. There are things that happen in your life in an acting career which are very encouraging, and yet there are lots of things that happen which are very discouraging. And the part which is discouraging is you're not working. You're not working a lot, the nice thing about film working or television working, it's always just for the day or two. It's fresh, it's new. When you do stage, you're doing the same thing. Maybe if it's a big hit on Broadway, you're doing it for years and years. It's like working in a factory in a way, So that I appreciate about working in film.
Garth, talk about doing the Star Trek conventions while having fans recognize you as Wilson, who's not even wearing a Starfleet costume, so perhaps you have to put on like a sticker or something. Or perhaps they're remembering you as a Trog-like prisoner. It's kind of an astonishing story because we are astonishing Star Trek fans, aren't we?
Well, first of all, it's not until actually recently that I discovered or realized that I am, at least in some way, a celebrity. I never thought of myself as a celebrity, but I go to conventions, and 2 of them have been what they call celebrity conventions, where I have pictures of myself. People come over and they give me money to sign my name. To Gary, Wilson, Star Trek, Mirror, Mirror, whatever. The very first one I did through a friend of mine who also had done a Star Trek, but one of the later ones, Cloud 9 or something like that, I'm not sure. He was part of an acting group that I belonged to, and he became aware that he was doing these Star Trek conventions. He became aware that I had done a Star Trek. And so he said, Garth, you ought to look into doing this. You'll make a lot of money. And I thought, well, it's worth a try. Why not? So I followed through and went to Las Vegas and did a Star Trek convention. I couldn't believe the amount of money I was making. I thought, this is incredible. I think I made $2,000 or $3,000 in just a couple of days. I had a wallet just full of money. In those days, I think it was $20, something like that. Now it's 30, whatever. But I had some interesting experiences at these conventions. I had some interesting experiences doing the conventions. Of course, the conventions are just full of people who've been in Star Trek and or paraphernalia that people are buying. Anyways, I'm sitting there at the table, and a woman approaches with what I assume is her husband, and she starts crying. And I said, what's the problem? She said, I'm very emotional. I said, well, look, I'm emotional too. Tell me, what's happening? She said, when I was a little girl, I lived in Brazil. I believe it was Brazil. It could have been Argentina. And I used to watch you, and I watched you in Spanish. And then later in life, we moved to Texas. And then I saw you again, and now you are speaking English. And here I am. You're here. I can't believe it. She was crying. She was so tied up emotionally. And then one time when I was in Chicago, nobody said anything to me about this, but it suddenly occurred to me. This one woman came over and she said, well, we've decorated all of our living room with Star Trek goodies, and now we're working on the staircase. And I said, where are you from? She's from Tennessee. And it suddenly occurred to me, especially in Chicago, it's a different situation in, let's say, Las Vegas, or especially here, where if they meet somebody who they've seen on TV in person, it is a big deal. I mean, these people are living in farms somewhere in the middle of nowhere, watching television. They're not surrounded by any sort of celebrities or exciting things that are happening in their life. And suddenly, here is somebody who they think, anyways, is a movie star, Yeah. So I found that very interesting, that it suddenly occurred to me that people, they need this. That's why I don't think that AI will ever replace real actors, because people want to know that these people are flesh, not made up by a computer.
Tell us about your acting career after Star Trek and in the 1979 film Malibu High, your role as Lance. And also talk about plans that never happened for an interview with the tag to re-release the film Malibu High.
Many years later, the director, and he may have been the producer too, asked me if I would do an interview like we're doing now. And I said, sure. So I met him somewhere, and it was in on Coengo Boulevard in a studio of some kind. And we did an interview, and he tried to get as many of the actors that were in the original film together to do a kind of a tag. He was putting out a DVD of the film, and I discovered that it's what's called a cult classic. And I had no idea why it was a cult classic or what he was talking about, but it turns out what he's talking about is that these films, this is a B film, was a film that they used to show in the drive-ins. And so it really didn't matter what was on the screen. The guys and girls would go there to make out. So it was a couple people would say, "Oh, I'll take it because my girlfriend will get bored," you know, and we can start necking, I guess.
Garth, you ventured into photography after acting, but this was into the late 1960s and into the early 70s. You became a professional photographer working for the Los Angeles Police Department and later for highly popular magazines such as Playboy and American Hairdresser and others. Can you tell us about this career in the photography industry?
Well, the point is, as anybody in the show business knows, it's a terribly insecure field to be in. And, you know, as I mentioned at one point, there are some actors who do extremely well at it, but the majority do not. So you need to find something else to make a living. I had always, I remember around the age of 16 or 17, being interested in photography and not knowing much about it, and tried something with a camera once and was very disappointed. But when I got out here, I had bought a camera and I had taken some photographs of a friend of mine who was an actor. And he needed pictures for an agent. And my friend went to his agent, and the agent said, "Oh, these are really good. Who took these?" And so my friend said, "The agent likes the pictures. Would I like the agent to recommend me?" I said, "Yeah, sure." So that's how the getting into it in terms of making a living began. Then as time went on, I did this film called Vixen, and not only was I one of the featured players in it, but I also made arrangements with the director, producer, et cetera, to do the still photography on it, which I did. Now, the problem is, in those days, it was film. Film was expensive, and I was paying for my own film to do this. Nowadays, it's digital, and you can shoot literally millions of photographs for virtually no money whatsoever. So I was being very careful about how I shot them. But it turns out that Vixen, of course, made a big splash in the world for what it was, and Playboy approached me and wanted to buy those pictures from me. So I sold it to them, and I didn't sell them to Playboy. No, I sold them to Penthouse. Penthouse did 3 or 4 pages of the pictures I had taken. Later, Playboy approached me because they knew that I knew Erica Gavin, and would ask me if I would be willing to take a photograph of Erica semi-nude with a bunch of turkeys around her. So it was around Thanksgiving. I said, "Yeah, sure." Talked Erica into it, and we did that. But I started to make a living actually on doing actors' composites, and I had several agents who sent me clients all the time to photograph. There got to be a point. I didn't have a studio at that time. I was doing everything in what's called existing natural light. I got to be a point. I was shooting so much, I was hoping it would rain so that I wouldn't have to do it at that particular day.
Really?
Oh yeah, it was getting to be too much. But I was also at the mercy of whether actors had money or not. In other words, if there was a strike that the actors were involved in, then I wasn't getting any calls. Then the strike would be over and I would start doing some photography again. But I also became aware that this is not going to work one day. When I get to a certain age, I cannot live on Social Security. So it seemed to me as though I needed a job. And a fellow up the street happened to be a police photographer, and he asked me if I might be interested in applying, testing for that. And the first time I said, no, I don't want to take pictures of people who've been murdered. So I passed. But then later I thought, gee, I gotta get something going here financially. So I said, yes, I will. And I put in my application to take a test. I came in high enough where I was hired. I worked at the police department as a crime photographer for 5 years, I think exactly to the day. And then I switched to the Department of Building and Safety, and I worked there for 23 years. Yeah.
Really? That's a huge career.
Yeah, so the point is, in the end, I ended up with a pension. Nothing great, you know, but I can get by. I do pretty much what I want to do. If I had known, this happened when I was in my 40s, if someone had said to me, Garth, you know, within a few years, you definitely will be making a living in acting, I never would have done that. You know, gotten into trying to make a living in photography, but there was no guarantee. On the side, I do my own photography, what I would call a creative photography. Some of it I think is very good. Some of it, as I look at it, I have a website with the pictures, over 700 pictures on that website, Fine Art America. Some of my, looking back at them, I think, why in the hell did I ever take that picture? It's terrible. I should take it off, but I leave them there.
Again, Garth?
Yeah.
Can you tell us the viewers what your website is?
What's that?
Can you tell the viewers what the exact website is, the www?
Oh, I think it's either www.garth.pillsbury@pixels.com.
Okay.
Yeah, if you go to Fine Art America and you just put in my name, you know, in a search, you know, it'll come up with it. There are a lot. Some of them are abstract, some of them are portrait, some are jazz people, some are impressionistic. There's all sorts of work there.
Garth, please talk about this Kevin Costner film.
I did a film called, originally it was called something else, but I think it ended up being called Stacy's Nights. And we shot that up in Reno. And it was a B film, but I thought it had a lot of potential. I thought the idea was good, but it really turned out to be a B film. One day, one of my stepdaughters called me on the phone and said, Garth, you're on TV with Kevin Costner. I said, I never did a film with Kevin Costner. She said, no, it's you. I said, it's not me. I never did a film with Kevin Costner. Well, it turns out that it was me. It was a film with Kevin Costner. I think it was probably his first film he ever made. And it ends up, I am in a film with Kevin Costner.
Really?
Yeah.
So you didn't know who he was?
I had no idea who he was. I don't think he knew who he was.
Garth, talk about some other big Hollywood actors that you worked with. I understand you had a chance to talk to a very famous actor, Robert Mitchum. Tell us about this.
I've had conversations with Marlon Brando for a whole afternoon, you know, for an hour or two, for a whole afternoon with Robert Mitchum. Interesting story there, I think, is that Marlon Brando, because he was always being pestered by people to talk about acting, how does he approach parts, whatever. When I spent time with Marlon Brando, I knew that, so I never talked about acting with him. We talked about other things. And so then a couple of years later, I had the opportunity to spend an afternoon with Robert Mitchum. Robert Mitchum was just the opposite. He loved to talk about acting, loved to talk about things that had happened, you know, and didn't happen and could have happened and whatever and ever. So I brought up the story about my spending some time with Marlon Brando, and he didn't want to talk about acting. And this is one of my favorite stories. Robert Mitchum said to me, of course he doesn't want to talk about acting. He can't act. And that was true, as I understand it, with Laurence Olivier and Dustin Hoffman. Laurence Olivier had a technique. He could come in and do a part. Bang, just do it. My understanding is that during the Marathon Man, Dustin Hoffman was running around the block over and over again to be in pain so he could do the scene. And Laurence Olivier said to him, Mr. Dustin, just act, forget all that stuff. I used to go running with Bruce Dern. You know, Bruce was a runner, and I would ride a bicycle. And I would ride a bicycle. He would run around the Forest Lawn Drive, and I spent a lot of time with Bruce. Yeah. The other interesting thing I find is that most people do not go out of their way to help you who are in the business, and I was very appreciative. Bruce Dern actually said, Garth, you are a good actor. You need to get an agent. You need to work. So he went out of his way to try to help me. Yeah.
That's really awesome.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's encouraging, I think, because sometimes I have, what's the word? I have frustrating, thoughts about, well, I'm not a very good actor. Yeah. But then I start thinking about the people who said, come over to me and said, you were really good.
Garth, were you aware that Leonard Nimoy got into photography and sold photography like yourself after Star Trek in his acting career? Also, did you collaborate with Nimoy? Also, talk about the prices of art-style photography on a website for sale.
Oh, I was not aware of it. No, I'm not even aware of it. Maybe somewhere in the past I may have run into that, and I thought, oh, interesting, but I've never looked up his work, if it is available to be seen. I don't know, which I probably will do now that you mention it. Sold a photograph there, and I'm changing the prices. Somehow or other, I let them go to what they call default, whatever prices they came up with. And they put down like an 8x10, $37. I thought, okay, whatever, But that's certainly cheap enough. I thought, well, wait a minute, maybe that's a big mistake. Because people, if you say this is worth $10, so what? It must not be very good. Yeah. So I'm little by little trying to change the prices. We're starting out at $500, and we're going to $750, $1,000, $2,000, depending upon the size, and up and up. So people, therefore, maybe will say, well, this guy must be really good if he's charging that much money. Maybe.
Garth, you are a true Star Trek legend, and as a fellow Trekkie, Lily and I, it has been an honor to speak with you today. We learned so much about you and your career, but it's only a snapshot of how of a great person that you truly are.
Snapshot. Was that a photography pun?
Yes, it was.
Okay, good one, BK. Well, Garth, from us and speaking for the fans, it's been an absolute pleasure. Lily Fox-Lim and Brian Kreutz are officially logging off. Until next week.